it should take a full 2 hours. So I might have just jinxed myself, but I think we can get this done hopefully well before 3:30. Next is approval of the proceedings from the May 2020 meeting. Does anyone have any changes or edits? If so, please raise your hand.
I don't see any hands. No hands.
Excellent. So seeing none, proceedings from May 2020 are accepted. And Tony, is there anyone signed up for public comment?
I would just ask if there's anybody from the members of the public that want to speak under public comment, please raise your hand. No one asked ahead of time, but just in case. And to raise your hand for the members of the public, you just click on that hand button. And I don't see any hands raised, Bill.
Excellent. So we can move right along into the commercial tagging program update from Kirby. So take it away, Kirby.
Thank you, Bill. Just give Maya a minute to get up the presentation on the screen. Looks like it's there now. Thank you. So moving into the next slide, we have an outline that I'm going to walk through, provide you all a little background. I'll provide a brief update on the state implementation, followed by considerations for planning the 2021 fishing season, and then consider potential management action by this board. So next slide, going through the background. As the board is aware, in October of 2018, the board moved to delay implementation of the tagging program until January 1st, 2020. Last fall, in preparation of this year's tagging program, the staff followed up with states to have an estimate of how many tags were needed. So the terminology we use in the plan is, we call it the biological metric. That is how each state comes up with their estimate of tags based on either a combination of the number of commercial harvesters and poundage that each state has landed in a certain period of years. So essentially with that biological metric, it gives us the number of tags that each state needs initially to carry out the tagging program in a year. So we put that out to all the states last fall. They provided that information, and we put the orders in for those tags and applicators by early October. And in turn, all states received their orders of tags and applicators by December last year. And the plan had been moving into the beginning of this year to implement starting in January. So moving on to the next slide, in terms of an update, states do not need to reimburse the commission for that initial order of 2020 tags. And as indicated before, states will be covering the cost of tags and applicators for the 2021 fishing season. Starting in March, due to the challenges that the COVID-19 pandemic created, it delayed implementation for a number of states in putting in place the tagging program. There is obviously a memo that provided state-by-state details, and so I won't try to go through each state, but to just provide a summary, highlighting some of the states and regions. Rhode Island has seen an increase in the need for tags from their initial order last fall, and in turn have already gone forward with placing additional tag orders this year. New Jersey has seen a lower market demand and activity in the spring, but will be planning to reopen their commercial fishery later this month. And the Delmarva states did not encounter issues in distributing the tags and beginning tagging the spring into the summer, with Virginia planning to reopen their commercial fishery in November. So one important note on the state-by-state update is that New York and Connecticut did not implement the tagging program due to challenges posed by the pandemic, but are planning to implement the tagging program next year in 2021. So moving to the next slide, some key considerations for 2021. The main thing to highlight is that while the Commission coordinated ordering the tags last year, much of that work will fall to the states this year. And in turn, states should plan to designate a state contact for coordinating with National Band and Tag Company to get orders in and tags delivered in time. And along those lines, states should work to have a plan in place for distributing tags ahead of the commercial fishing season. While many things are uncertain about the future, specifically around the impacts of the COVID-19 pandemic and whether it persists well into next year, having a plan to deal with either social distancing or other restrictions will be important. Similar to last year, we will need every state to put together a biological metric and have their tag requests ready soon. To aid the National Band and Tag Company in ensuring that enough materials are available to produce the tags in a timely fashion, I'll be reaching out to the states to provide an estimate of their tags that they will need for the upcoming season, and hope to get that from states within the next few weeks. But overall, to ensure the tags are delivered in enough time, we're asking that states be ready to send their orders into the National Band and Tag Company no later than October 1st. And that's a date by which to ensure that those tags are received before the end of this year. Just to be clear, the plan for the design of the 2021 tags is that it would be almost exactly the same as the tags that were used for this year, just with the date updated from 20 to 21. And as a reminder, per the Amendment 1 requirements, states need to collect unused 2020 tags by February 15th, 2021. This requirement is to help with tag accounting to make sure unused tags are not available to be applied in most states and create confusion for law enforcement. A report out on unused tags, for example, how many were returned and the disposition for any not accounted for, whether they were lost, used, or broken, will need to be included in the annual compliance report, which will be due later next spring. So for the 2021 fishing season, New York is requesting to use their unused 2020 tags. This is because none were distributed to the industry and the financial costs. Per requirements in Amendment 1 under Section 4.4.2 commercial tagging on page 74, there's the need to have single-use tags every year that are inscribed with the year of issue, the state of issue, and a unique number. As all other states plan to use tags inscribed with the year of 2021, New York is looking to have an exception to this requirement, and in turn, the board will need to consider approval of it. To aid the board's consideration of this request, the LEC, the Law Enforcement Committee, was notified and they provided feedback. Overall, the LEC members noted the following: that with early enough notice to state and federal law enforcement staff, they don't anticipate this being a problem. This request by New York should be considered as a one-time exception rather than precedent setting. And that as part of the tagging program, state accounting of unused tags will be important to ensure that 2020 tags from other states are not in circulation. So last, if the board approves this, the LEC should be notified well in advance of the upcoming fishing season. So that concludes my presentation. I'll take any questions about the state-by-state updates or any other things I covered. And I'll just offer that if there are any specific questions to New York regarding their situation this year or their plan for next year, to maybe refer to the New York commissioners to answer those. Thank you.
Okay, thanks, Kirby. So we'll start off with some questions for Kirby. And once these questions are done, I'll ask for a motion from New York regarding their request to use the 2020 tags in 21. So, Tony, is there anybody with their hands up with questions for Kirby?
Yes, John Clark.
Go ahead, John.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Kirby, if New York is getting to use the 2020 tags again in 2021, why would that not be applicable to other states? I mean, I think like a lot of states, not knowing what the demand would be for tags this year, we got a lot more than we needed. That we'll probably end up using. So I'm just curious as to why that couldn't be extended to other states.
Yeah, thanks, John, for the question. I think the simplest way to look at it is that if there isn't uniformity in how the year is ascribed to tags for all states, it creates challenges for enforcement to ensure that tags from a previous year are not being applied. And so having effectively an exception for one state makes it clear across all state and federal law enforcement staff that they would only be looking for one state to be using previous year's tags.
And Kirby, correct me if I'm wrong, but wasn't that a specific comment by the law enforcement committee that they were comfortable with this so long as it was only New York?
And Jason, Bill, I just wanted to let you know that Jason Snellbaker is the law enforcement rep, and he is on the call if you wanted Jason to answer any of these questions.
I'm comfortable with anybody answering.
And Jason, I've unmuted your line if you needed to answer those questions.
Yes, that is correct. If it was only one state, it wouldn't be a problem. If multiple states were doing it, that could cause some concern. So to answer your question, yes, that's true. I believe it was okay as long as it was only one state and there was an exception for this year alone.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Like I said, I was just curious about that, and it does seem kind of interesting that if I recall, the tagging, the impetus was coming from New York, and the fact that they didn't get any tagging done this year is a little surprising.
The only thing I'll remind you of, John, is that the epicenter of this pandemic was in the greater New York area, and that was who was hardest hit during the throughout the late winter and throughout the spring.
Oh, I understand that, Mr. Chair, but I'm just saying that the tags were distributed in 2019, and like many other states, we distributed them before the pandemic really took hold here in Delaware. Yeah. So, I mean, it wouldn't have been impossible for them to distribute tags.
So, Tony, do we have anybody else up for questions?
You have Maureen Davidson.
Go ahead, Maureen.
Okay, thank you. I just wanted to respond that I'm not sure when the season for Tautog opens up for other states, but for New York, our 2020 season, to be inclusive of both Long Island Sound and the Atlantic Ocean, would not have opened until April of 2020. So we already had told our fishermen how many tags they were going to get. We already had sort of made our assignments. We were making up our bundles of tags as we would send them out. And as COVID started to spread, we were sent home. Our last day of work was March 13th, right before we would have started to distribute tags. And we realized once we were sent home, it would not have been possible for us to really adequately and fairly give out all of the tags and make sure all the fishermen who needed them would have them. Also, remember that I believe we asked for close to over 100,000 tags. And so we have a large amount of tags to distribute. We currently have all of our 2020 tags. They were not distributed at all to any fishermen. So given that we were the epicenter, we were sent home in the first half of March, it was not possible for us to start initiating our tagging program in 2020.
Thank you, Maureen. Tony, do we have any other hands up at this point?
Yes, you have Eric Reed and then Adam Nowalski. And
Go ahead,
Eric,
Eric.
I've opened your line.
Thank you, Tony. Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Could somebody remind me when the New York fishing season ends, please?
Maureen, can you respond to that?
Yes, so inclusive of both bodies of water, it opens April 16th and continues through January 25th of the following year. So when
Thank
we
you.
were discussing tagging originally, we said that you would not see tagged New York State Tautog until April.
Okay, thank you,
So does
Maureen.
that mean is your season open on January 1st or not?
Our season is open then. Yes, it's open then. But we sort of consider that part of the previous year's season and that we open in April.
Eric, that's the information you need?
Yeah, thank you.
Okay, very good. I believe Adam is next.
Great, thank you very much. So the purpose of New York requesting to use the 2020 tags for 2021 is what? It's my understanding that the commission is paying for the tags. I understand that there would clearly be a cost savings for the commission, but is there any benefit to New York to not getting 2021 tags directly instead of 2020 tags?
Adam, I'll take a shot at that. Just for clarification, the commission is covering the costs and not seeking reimbursement for all of the 2020 tags that had been distributed. So any advantage to New York is for the 100,000 plus tags that they are going to need during 2021, they would be able to use those 2020 tags that the commission picked up the cost from, and therefore would accrue some savings therein.
So the commission is not paying for 2021 tags, states are paying for 2021 tags?
Correct. Tony, is there anybody else with a hand up with a question?
Yes, Dan McKiernan.
Dan, go ahead.
Yeah, thank you. I would ask the commission staff to look a little closer at the question of tag purchases and reimbursements, because I was just communicating with my CFO, and Massachusetts, I think, sent ASMFC a payment of $6,900 for our tags this year. That's just one comment. The other is there's two aspects to this conservation regulation. One is the requirement to put tags on fish, and the other is to require tags in commerce. So I guess one of the questions I'd ask the other states is, despite the fact that we had a couple of states that didn't tag their fish this year, how does that affect the rules on possession of tag to tog in commerce?
Kirby, is that something that you can take a stab at?
Yeah, Mr. Chair, I'll say that I'm a little puzzled. I'm not sure how best to respond. Dan, if you would mind kind of framing it again in terms of what you're looking for, if it's from staff or you're looking for the other states to provide clarity on that.
Sure, Kirby. Well, my first question is, I thought I saw a slide earlier that said the commission was going to cover the cost of tags in this first year, but I believe our state actually paid the commission for the tags, the 2020 tags that we gave out to our fishermen over the last few weeks. Our fishery opens today. So I just want staff to reconfirm that, because I'm hearing in other aspects of this conversation an assumption that ASMFC is covering those costs this year. No, I don't think that's accurate across the board. The second question is, I just have questions about the impacts of 2 states not tagging fish this year and what effect that has on the commerce standard that we have as states. So in Massachusetts, it's going to be unlawful for any dealer to have an untagged tautog, period, even if that tautog is coming from the state of New York. I know New York is the epicenter of tautog marketing, so maybe by just New York not enforcing that standard on its dealers, it all works out. There'll be tagged fish and untagged fish, I assume, this year. But I do have that question about how states are dealing with possible untagged fish in light of what we just heard about New York and Connecticut.
Gotcha. Okay, so for the first one, yes, Dan, this commission is not seeking reimbursement for those 2020 tags that were ordered last fall and distributed to the states. So we can work to try to get that squared away with you all regarding any reimbursement that you might have submitted already. Regarding the second one, I think that is more of a question for each of the individual states to confirm if outside of the fishing reports that we get, as part of compliance, that the tags needed to be applied this year. For a commerce standpoint, I'm not certain how much I can speak to that based on what is reported out in our annual compliance reports. I mean, we'll be getting that next year, obviously, based on how this year went.
Okay, Dan, I don't think that entirely answers your question, but I think it's safe to say that that's something that folks are thinking about. Is there anyone who wants to add additional comment from any of the states? Okay, hearing none. Tony, has anybody else got their hand up?
I don't see any hands up, Dan. I just wanted to let you know that your line is still unmuted.
Okay, seeing no hands up for any further questions directed towards Kirby. Maureen, do you have a motion?
Yes, I do.
Okay, go ahead.
Okay, thank you. I would like to move to approve New York's request to use 2020 tags for the 2021 fishing season as part of the commercial harvest tagging program. Only commercial tags with the indicated year of 2020 will be allowed in New York. All other states will use commercial tags with the year 2021.
Is there a second to that motion?
Dan McKiernan has his hand up.
Okay, so we've got motion. So it's moved and seconded to approve New York's request to use 2020 tags for 2021 fishing season as part of their commercial harvest tagging program. Only commercial tags with the indicated year of 2020 will be allowed in New York. All other states will use commercial tags with the year 2021. Maureen, would you like to add anything?
Oh, yes, thank you. As I said, we have not distributed any 2020 tags to our fishermen. So the only tags that New York will be able to use that they should be able to use will be the 2020 tag. Now, although we didn't have to pay for these tags, they do represent an investment by ASMFC in a large number of tags for New York State to be able to participate in the tagging program in 2020. It would be a large waste if we just took those tags and threw them away or took them to the recycling center. Our fish will be tagged for our 2021 fishing season, starting in April 25th. We have the date, April 16th. Our fish will be tagged with these tags. in 2022, New York State will purchase the appropriate year to resume tagging with the correct tag for the correct year. We just want to be able to use the 2020 tag for the season of 2021. I'll be happy to answer any questions.
Okay, so we've got a motion on the table. Is there any comment or discussion? If so, please raise your hand.
Dan, I'm not sure if you wanted to comment. You still had your hand raised from seconding, and then you have Mike Luisi followed by Eric Reed.
Yes, I would like to ask Maureen a question. And it
Go ahead,
getting
Dan.
back to the commerce question. So will New York amend its regulations about possession for dealers that states that for in the year 2021 that all Tautog must be tagged with either a valid tag from the other states bearing a 2021 year, but for New York, it will be for the 2020 year. I just want to make sure, because this is all about accountability and the trade of this fish, and this is the driving force behind this, and I just want to make sure that New York will amend its dealer standards as well.
Yes, we'll make sure that our dealer standards are correlate to what we're trying to do in practice. I'm not, we will, obviously our tags will have 2020 on them and all the other states will have 2021. Did I answer your question?
I guess the question, Maureen, is that Dan is asking, is that going to be reflected in some change that you're going to make to your state rules or regulations?
I'm not sure if I will look. I'm going to look. I have to look at our regulations to see if they specify the year. Then we'll have to adapt. We'll have to change them.
Dan, you good?
But they will. Yeah, they will correspond with what we're doing in practice. We will not have our regulations. Yeah.
I'm good, thank you.
Okay, very good. I believe Mike Luisi was next.
Yeah, thank you, Mr. Chairman. I'm just trying to understand, and maybe this I could ask a question of Maureen through you.
Go ahead.
What's the plan in New York, given the current situation that we're in, that would be any different a few months from now if nothing's changed and we're still working at home and the offices are, not as functioning as they were when the pandemic started? I mean, I'm trying to understand the process of why the tags can't be distributed so that they can start being applied at the first of the year rather than in April. I don't know if that's something that can be answered. Thank you.
All right. Can you hear me?
We can hear you.
Hello?
We can hear you.
Okay.
Yep, I can hear you.
I'm doubly muted, so sometimes I confuse myself. Back in 2019, when we were discussing how the tags were going to be deployed for 2020, New York and one other state, I don't remember which one, said that we would not have our current year's tags in the market in January because our fishery will close January 25th. And it reopens in April. So the way we look at it, we include the 3 weeks in January in the previous year, and we start our season in April. We don't want that. This gives us actually a period of time where there's no harvest of tautog, and we can ensure that only 1 year's tag will be in use and will be in the market. And so that was one of the things that we also wanted to make sure, because this way the tags you're using in December, the tags you're going to use 3 weeks into January, and then our fisheries season is closed, and we will use that period of time to eliminate all of the previous year's tags and start up new in April with that current year's tag. And at the time when we discussed this in, I think it was 2019, it was at that point, it seemed like it was all right with everyone. If there are still questions about it, we can talk about it. But it really does make it a very clean season for us. when the previous year is over at the end of January, or in the middle, or the end of January. At the end of January, we have until April. We tell the dealers they can't have fish with that on it. We tell the fishermen they can't use them, and we start fresh in April.
Mike, that answer your question?
Yeah. Thanks, Mr. Chairman. And if I could just quick follow up. So thanks, Maureen, for the reminder about kind of how New York season operates and the start and the end. I guess my follow up is if the current situation that we're all operating under continues, is there a plan to actually have the tags distributed start in 2021? You know, because the commerce issue was kind of the main part of this, and I'm just wondering if New York has an intention, if we remain under the, I wouldn't call it a lockdown, but if we remain in this kind of work at home situation, is there a plan to get those tags out if this is approved, to make sure that in 2021 that all the states are going to have tags in circulation?
Mike, I think actually this might apply to all states in a way, because first thing I just want to say is I can't even predict what can happen with anyone, any state with COVID-19. However, I could say at this point, we have been in lockdown, we've been telecommuting for the past 6 months, and being able to work from home or work from the office is something that we are definitely much more used to. I'm home right now, participating in this. And at this point, it's not, when this happened, we were supposed to get them out in time for April, and we were sent home in March. And there was just really no time for us to adapt, to figure out, how do we do this? How do we work from home? Right now, we have so many tools for working from home. We have our split schedules. I think, I'm foreseeing something really horrible, which I don't want to talk about. I believe right now we are definitely much better prepared to deal with making sure our tags are out in time for April 2021.
All right, thank you so much. I appreciate that. Thanks.
And Mike, if I'll add, I think your question is germane for Connecticut as well. I mean, Connecticut will be using the 2021 tags, but their plans to implement this year were scuttled in a similar manner to what happened in New York. And in my discussions with Justin, he had indicated that now there's work at home is in place, and there's enough advance time in order to ensure that this is done as intended for 2021. Justin, do you want to add anything there?
Sure, Mr. Chairman, thanks. Yeah, just you covered it, that Connecticut's not anticipating any issues with distributing these tags ahead of our April 1, 2021 season opener. It's not going to be as easy as it would have been otherwise. Our offices are still closed. Everybody's still working from home, but we're going to make it work. So we anticipate we'll be able to implement this program in 2021 as we intended to in 2020.
Understood. Thank you, guys. Thank you, everybody.
Okay, excellent. Tony, do we have any other hands up?
Yep, Eric Reed has said his question was covered, so we now have Tom Fody, followed by Adam Nowalski.
Go ahead, Tom.
Yeah, I'm really concerned. I'm trying to figure out how they are basically doing inspections with police in New York and Connecticut. If you have untagged fish, blackfish, you just said it was caught in the States, so we didn't put the tags out. So how does are you not allowed to basically ship out of state? Because New Jersey would have to have tags on a fish before you could sell, so you can't close that market to you. I'm trying to figure out how you're doing this in New York and Connecticut. So really, are you turning down fish in the market that have no tags, but just by saying they're from New York or from Connecticut?
So I could speculate, Tom, but I think what I will ask is for Justin and Maureen to respond as best they can. They have better firsthand knowledge. Go ahead, one of you, pick it up.
Sure, Mr. Chairman. This is Justin from Connecticut. So, essentially, we made a decision this year not to implement the tagging program. We had not distributed any tags yet. As Maureen mentioned, the timing of the pandemic and when we got sent home from work, it was about the same time as New York. It was literally the week where we would have started distributing the tags. Everybody went home. So we essentially decided not to implement the program this year. We did not distribute any tags to our fishermen, and our enforcement officers are essentially not enforcing the requirement for tagging prior to offloading this year because we didn't distribute any of the tags. In terms of what's happening in the marketplace, I honestly can't tell you. Obviously, we have fish that could be potentially getting landed in Connecticut that are not being tagged. Those fish could then potentially be sold or brought to another state, and I can't sort of speculate on how other states are going to handle that, but I will acknowledge that it did create an issue that there can be fish entering the marketplace this year that are not tagged that were landed in Connecticut.
Maureen, is that answer pretty much consistent with New York as well?
Yes. Our law enforcement did not look for tagged fish in the market this year since our fish were not tagged and we did not distribute tags. I cannot say what happened to New York State fish that went into other states, tried to go into the markets of other states. I don't know. I know that our fishermen were definitely, affected by this, and I can't say that, that there were that many fish available at times during this crisis. So it might not have been as much of an issue if it's in a year where people were fishing heavily. So yeah, it's pretty much what Justin said.
Okay, so to summarize, in both Connecticut and New York, not implementing the program also meant not enforcing it within their state borders. However, there's an acknowledgement that fish potentially could be leaving those states and entering into the markets in other states and causing confusion. And that's all 2020. What I'll remind the board at this point in time is that the motion that's before us has to do with 2021. So if I can, I would like to shift the focus to the motion that's on the table and the actions, the action that New York is proposing for 2021, a year in which all the states have committed to fully implementing this program as intended, with the one exception, New York's request to use their 100,000 plus 2020 tags during the 2021 fishing season. So, Tony, is there, I believe Adam was in the queue?
That's correct.
Go ahead, Adam.
Thank you very much. So, given that from what I've heard, New York was all ready to go with this in March, and what stopped them from moving forward was being sent home, the COVID pandemic, not knowing how to work that way. In 6 months, we've learned how to work remotely. Observers have gone back on fishing vessels. Enforcement is doing enforcement. We've got MRIP, APIS interviews. What is stopping New York from starting to use their 2020 tags ASAP through the end of their season in January of 2021?
Maureen, that's a question to you.
So Adam, you're saying that we should just sort of distribute our tags now and then use them through the end of our season in January?
I'm asking the question, if New York was all ready to go in March to implement this for the entirety of their 2020 season, which would include this fall, which would include through January 20th, 25th, whatever the date was. Yeah, the question at this point is, if everything was ready to go, why not start distributing tags now, getting tags on those fish, getting them into the marketplace, as opposed to just putting off this tagging entirety for another 8 months?
Well, we wouldn't, first of all, we wouldn't adequately use the tags that we have right now. We would only use a portion of them, given we'd only be having a portion of our fishing season. And also, it's sort of just cleaner. We were able to stop, not implement the tagging program for 2020. Okay. I'm not sure if do you feel starting the season now in the middle of the year is adequate? It's appropriate? I think that it's just sort of cleaner that we just start with the following fishing season, the following fishing year.
And I'll add that, Adam, I think your question is germane to Connecticut as well. So just put you on the spot as well, just to respond.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. So our commercial season is closed right now, but we'll open up again on October 1st. I guess, a couple things. One is that we had already made a decision that we were not going to implement this program this year and sent a notice indicating that to our fishing community. Does that mean we couldn't reverse that decision and turn around and decide that we want to implement it for this year? I suppose not. It would be a fairly big production to try to implement it over the next month and ahead of the October 1st opener. I also feel like, given that New York and Connecticut share Long Island Sound, that I feel like both states need to be doing this to make it effective for enforcement in Long Island Sound. So, our decision in Connecticut not to implement this year back during, March, a big part of the calculus there was the fact that, New York wasn't planning on implementing. And so we didn't think it made sense for Connecticut to implement if New York wasn't. So I guess that would be my answer, that, I would follow New York's lead on whichever way they want to go this year with implementing or not. I'm not going to say we couldn't do it. It would be difficult. We also have a much smaller fishery than New York and Long Island Sound, all of which is to say that, it's not saying that there isn't value in us doing the program. But that's kind of a bit of a long-winded answer, but essentially it boils down to, there's nothing saying we couldn't do it this year, but we have not been planning on it. And we sent notice to our fishing community saying we weren't going to implement it this year.
Okay, Adam, do you have any follow-up?
I don't have any follow-up questions. If there's a comment to be made here, the comment would be made that we're all doing difficult things. I'm completely sympathetic to the plights of the biologists involved at the management level. I'm completely sympathetic to telling somebody one thing, only to tell them something different. I think we've heard that, certainly as fishermen, we've heard that many times in the last 6 months. As individuals in all businesses, we've heard different things. We've all done difficult in ways that we didn't think were probably possible 7 months ago. So I would really like to see these tags on these fish in the marketplace as soon as possible. And if both states were ready to go with this, and the only thing that was stopping them was being sent home from the office, and we didn't know how to work remotely, and we've learned that, I'd like to see these two states make an effort here to get these tags on fish so that they get in the marketplace, we can achieve the goals of the amendment. And for that reason, I'm going to have to be opposed to the motion. Thank you.
Okay. Tony, who do we have next? Thank you.
We have, I'm not sure, Tom, if his hand is raised from before, if he has re-raised his hand, Dan McKiernan, followed by Maureen Davidson.
So, Tom,
So
is this
No, yeah, I would like to follow up my answer, because I got concerns. What is happening in Connecticut and New York, since we're all supposed to be tagging fishing, New Jersey, Maryland, Rhode Island, Massachusetts, it leaves an illegal market open in New York, because if nobody's tagging fish, it means that I hate to say this, my fishermen could possibly run fish across and basically land them, sell them in the market in New York, and there'd be nothing way of following up on that. And that's why I was thinking what Adam was saying. That's a concern for me, because it allows a illegal market open up for 5 more months.
Okay, Tom.
How do you stop that? I'm asking the states, how do they stop that?
Does anybody have, I mean, I think that's in part responded to by New York and Connecticut by saying that their suspend program also included suspension of enforcement. At least for those states, I think that would be the answer that's given. Folks, here's my screen just went blank.
I think that might be you. I still
Okay.
see the screen.
Okay,
Bill.
very good. Unless there's somebody wants to add something, then I'll move to Dan.
Bill, Jason Snellbaker, our law enforcement rep, has his hand raised, I think maybe to respond to that question. Is it okay if I unmute him?
Absolutely.
All right, Jason, I've unmuted you.
Yes, can everybody hear me?
Yep.
Okay, so, I understand not having the metal tag creates a problem and really hurts the intent of the whole tagging program. But it's not like there's not going to be any enforcement. I just want to put this out there that all states are required to have records of some sort. So yes, can somebody catch illegal fish in New York, and can there be records that say they came from Connecticut where there's no tag on them currently? That could happen, but we're really no worse off than we were before. And I guess, that's the reason we're having the tagging program, is to make the system better. But I just want to put out there's still going to be enforcement. We can still look at records. Or is it foolproof? Is it bomb-proof? Absolutely not. But there is still a sense of enforcement. And, we'll eventually, 5 months from now, hopefully get to the point where we'll have a fresh start with 100% tagging across the board.
Okay, thank you. I believe Dan was next.
That's
Yeah,
correct.
thanks,
And then
Bill.
Morgan Davidson.
So from Massachusetts perspective, I guess I'd like to express a level of disappointment that the 2 states pulled the plug really without sharing that detail, because we might have done the same, or because our fishery opens on September 1. So we just spent the last 6 weeks sending our staff into the office, to make appointments with fishermen to hand out these tags. But having said that, there's an upside to us managing the mass quota, and we have a quota, as does Rhode Island. And so I'm looking forward to the benefits of managing our quota in a more accountable way. So, I don't have a real problem, going forward with this program, at least at my state level. I don't feel like it's a waste of time, because we still have some quota compliance issues that we're trying to get a handle on in Massachusetts. So we still welcome that, and we think that that's of course an important part of this program. I understand that the gold standard was to make sure that every fish in commerce was tagged, and if we don't get to that this year, I can live with that, because I think we're really close. We're only half a year away, and this is a pandemic year, and this is the season of saying yes when people have serious challenges. But I just want to be clear that at least in my state, we're not going to back off of the need to see tagged fish in commerce. So if there's a fish that's untagged in Massachusetts, we intend to seize that. And so if New York and Connecticut want to have a different standard because of their tagging situation, I understand that, but I think it makes more sense for us in terms of us managing our quota for our local population of Tautog that we share with Rhode Island, that we stick to our guns and maintain the tagging standard for the fishermen and also in commerce. So that should be made clear to like a New York dealer who might want to ship fish to Massachusetts. I don't know if that actually happens on any great quantity, but they won't be able to ship any untagged fish to us. So I'll stop there.
Okay, thank you, Dan. So we had considerable discussion over 2020 and what happened and what didn't happen and what the regulations are. The motion that's on the floor focuses on 2021 with implementation in 2021, albeit with New York using their 2020 tags. So I'll ask, is there any further comments specifically on the motion that anybody would like to make?
You have
Tony?
Maureen Davidson with her hand up.
Maureen?
Well, thank you. I sort of was trying to respond to some of the comments that were coming through. Adam, yes, back in March, we were ready to send the tags out. Right now, for us to get the tags out, I think it would be a waste of our tags because we have so many tags that we would put 2020 tags out there and have to throw away. I mean, I realize we all will be throwing away tags, but we really require tags, and I think the wisest use of the tag would be to start them with a full fishing year. This was an unusual year. This is something that does not happen once in 100 years, and so yes, this is going to be sort of a bump in how fisheries management is being done. But New York right now has every intention of fully implementing its tagging program in 2021. We just ask that we be able to use our tags that we have from 2020. Thank you.
Okay, anybody else, Tony?
I don't see any other hands at this time. If I'm missing somebody, please raise your hand again.
Okay, well, seeing that there are no hands up at this point in time, we'll close the discussion. The motion is, oh, and by the way, Tony, I do not have anything on my screen, so I can hear what's going on, operating without a screen, just to let you know. So the motion is to approve New York's request to use 2020 tags for the 2021 fishing season as part of the commercial harvest tagging program. Only commercial tags with the indicated year 2020 will be allowed in New York. All other states will use commercial tags with the year 2021. So there has been some opposition to this voiced. So I was hoping to be able to do this by consensus, but I don't think that's possible. We will go to a vote. Why don't we have caucus for 2 minutes, and then Kirby call the vote.
And Bill, what we've been doing is just having the states raise their hand, and I will read out which states are voting in favor and against, and then Kirby can let you know the count.
Okay, excellent. So 2 minutes. Okay, Tony, why don't you have people vote?
Thanks, Bill. All those in favor, please raise your hand. I have, and I will take your hands down for you so you can leave them up. I have Delaware, Connecticut, NOAA Fisheries, New York, Virginia, and Maryland. Kirby, what's that count?
Tony, Massachusetts wants to vote yes.
Okay, and Massachusetts.
That's 6 for yes.
I got 7.
7.
7,
Sorry.
including Mass, that's 7.
Sorry, thank you.
Yep. All those against, please raise your hand. I have New Jersey, which is 1 against. That one I can count. Any abstentions? I do not see any abstentions. Any null, N-U-L-L votes? 1 null vote from Rhode Island.
Okay, so the motion passes, 7 in favor, 1 opposed, 0 abstentions, and null. So next on the agenda is an update on the 2001 stock assessment update by Katie Drew. Go
And
ahead,
Mr.
Katie.
Chairman, before we have Katie speak, if it would be all right for Bob to make a comment, Bob Beal.
Absolutely. Go ahead, Bob.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Just want to make 2 quick points. The first is I think the conversation that the Tautog board just had is probably going to happen again in a lot of different boards. You know, the states under the pandemic situation we're in, states have had a big range of abilities to achieve compliance requirements in FMPs. A lot of times it's been fishery independent surveys or biological sampling and different things. And, you know, the commission is going to have conversations on how much of that, you know, is essentially. So, you know, this board handled it well and figured out a plan moving forward. And we may have to have that conversation in other management boards. So that's just a sort of and the second point, I want to get back to Dan McKiernan's comment about Massachusetts reimbursing ASMFC for their tags. This is one of those sort of awkward things of if we were in the in-person meeting, staff would have ran over to the corner, huddled up and said, hey, what's going on with Dan's comment? And so we had to do that over text while you guys were having your production conversation. So, but what we found out is Massachusetts, Rhode Island, New Jersey, Delaware, and Maryland have all reimbursed ASMFC for their tags so far. A few states have not. So my reaction is that ASMFC was going to pay for the tags up front and the states were going to pay us back. But we're going to go back to the minutes and make sure that's correct. You know, it's a little bit unclear what we all agreed to. We just don't recall right off the top of our heads, you know, what we all agreed to at the end of last calendar year. So we'll go back to the minutes, dig that up and let you know. But I wanted to sort of chime in that we hear you, Dan, and you're not alone. 4 other states have paid the commission back for those tags, and we'll dig into it and see what the situation is and let the board know.
Okay, thank you, Bob. So again, as I said, next is an update on the 2021 stock assessment update by Katie Drew. And Tony, I'm going to leave and try to come back in to get my screen back up and working. So I know it's a little bit of a risk, but I'm going to take it.
Okay, thanks, Bill. And I will, if Katie finishes, I'll just ask for questions if I don't see you back yet.
Okay, go ahead, Katie.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Thanks, everybody. I'm just going to give you a quick update on what's happening with the stock assessment update. So if we can go to the next slide, please. We are, right now, we have the here is the stock assessment subcommittee. It's been updated since the time we did the last assessment update. And as you can see, I think we just wanted to point out with this, obviously all great and very technical people who are going to do a great job with this assessment. But just as a reminder, this is technically for stock assessment updates because we do this at the regional level. And so we've tried to get SAS members who can represent their region and make sure that there's some regional representation to handle the lead analysis for each of these regions. Next slide, please. And so here's kind of the timetable that we're on. Basically, our plan, we've started this early because we do plan to have the 2020 year be the terminal year, but because we have to go back and redo the catch and age for all regions to include the new MRIP data, so it's not just a matter of adding 2016 through 2020 data, we have to go back and redo the entire catch and age for all 4 regions. So we've started the process this year. And we've compiled all of the data through 2029 has been submitted. And going forward, the stock assessment subcommittee members are working on redeveloping the catch and age with the new MRIP data through 2019 so that we can have that sort of in place and ready to go by the time we get the 2020 data. And so we'll be doing some preliminary runs with the new MRIP data through 2019 just to make sure everything is working and that we have a good base model run so that when we get the 2020 data, we can turn it around fairly quickly and have the assessment update ready for the board the week of October 19th, that is annual meeting of next year with a terminal year of 2020. Obviously, there are probably going to be a couple of caveats related to the current coronavirus situation. Number one, I think it's unclear what the impact is going to be on the data in terms of the availability of MRIP estimates. Is there going to be any gap filling for the MRIP estimates? What's going on with the fishery independent and fishery dependent sampling for 2020, et cetera. So 2020 will, of course, be a year with a fairly high degree of uncertainty, but because we average the fishing mortality rates over the past 3 years for this species, we felt that including 2020 in this year's estimate is going to be a little bit muted. That impact's going to be a little reduced with the averaging approach. So we're going to continue to go forward and include the 2020 data. It's possible that the assessment timeline will get pushed back a little depending on how long it takes to get sort of any kind of validated or backfilled, if you will, MRIP estimates. So the May 1st data assumes that we will have data available at that point, but I think it's very unclear as to what's going to happen on that side. But so this is our ideal timeline. We're continuing to work our way through it, and we'll just see what happens at the beginning of next year with this, as with so many other things. So I'm happy to take questions now. Thanks.
Thanks, Katie. Anybody have any questions?
Justin Davis, followed by Jason McNee.
Justin.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. So, Katie, I'm wondering, this is the first Tautog stock assessment that will include the new MRIP numbers, I believe. And I'm just wondering, maybe it's too early to comment, but are we going to have the same dynamic with this species where catch estimates have tripled or quadrupled relative to the old MRIP? And, we're going to have that same dynamic of those MRIP numbers sort of elevating stock biomass estimates, but also creating a much higher benchmark for recreational catch and harvest that we have to measure potential harvest targets against.
So yes, it's likely. Obviously, with Tautog, we have been seeing declining catch in the most recent years, and so I think this is probably going to be a little closer to the weak fish situation than to say the striped bass or bluefish situation. But it's likely that we will see a slight increase in the biomass, and therefore potentially a slight increase in the biomass target, although it's unlikely to change stock status dramatically. But for sure, I think, the important thing for the comparison is going to be less about did we hit our specific catch quotas and more about have we brought F down under the F target yet. And so hopefully that component will not be as impacted by the MRIP changes as the biomass component. But again, it is something that we're going to have to wait and see. Plus, since, we are adding 5 years of data to this assessment, and so there is the potential that things have changed biologically, although probably not significantly, other than just the MREP numbers.
Very good. Jason?
Thanks, Mr. Chair. I actually had a very similar question, and so it's been answered. Thank you, though. Thanks, Katie.
Okay. Tony, any other hands up?
Not that I see.
Okay. Thank you, Katie. This brings us to the election of a vice chair. I believe Justin Davis is prepared to make a nomination. Justin?
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. So it's my pleasure to nominate Mike Louisi from Maryland to be the new vice chairman of the Tautog Management Board.
Thanks, Justin. Oh, is this do we do this via motion, so it needs a second and all that? Tony?
Yes.
Yes, Mr. Chair.
Okay, do we have a second?
We do. Dan McKiernan.
Okay, thanks, Dan. So there's been the move to elect Mike Louisi as vice chair of the Tautog Management Board. Any discussion?
No one has their hand up. Sorry.
Okay, very good. So is it possible to unmute everybody? Tony, can you do that?
It will unmute every single person on this webinar if I do that.
It will?
Yes.
Okay. That's a bad thing, right?
If more than one person is unmuted at a time, then the sound quality becomes very difficult. I think you could just ask if there's any objection to the motion.
I know, I just didn't want it that way. I wanted to have everybody in favor say aye. So we can't do that. This is sort of a holiday to anything, but we'll do it that way. Is there anybody who's Mike Louisi being vice chair of the Tautog Management Board? Tony? Tony, any hands up?
Action. Bill, can you hear me?
Yes, I can.
Okay, I see no hands raised in objection to the motion. I'm not sure if you heard me say that. The webinar screen sort of did something weird there.
Yeah, I didn't hear you. So very good. So Mike, congratulations, you're the vice chair of the Tautog Board.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Looking forward to it.
Very good. Excellent. At this point, I'll ask if there's any other business.
I do not see any hands raised.
Very good. And our business is concluded for the day, and we are adjourned. Thank you, everyone. And Mike for accepting.
Thank you.
Thanks, everybody. Thank you, Bill.